big week ahead in the ongoing Epstein file saga. On Monday, members of the House Oversight Committee will depose convicted Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Also on Monday, members of Congress will get their first chance to review the unredacted versions of the 3 million recently released files. Meanwhile, some repercussions to the Epstein files are already playing out overseas. Former UK ambassador to the United States, Peter Mendelsohn, is retiring from Parliament's upper chamber due to his links to Epstein. He was fired as ambassador by Prime Minister Keir Starmer back in September over his ties to Epstein. Mendelsohn has denied any knowledge of or complicity in Epstein's sexual crimes. And now Starmer is also facing growing calls to resign since he appointed Mendelsohn. In countries like Poland, Norway, France, and Slovakia, we are now seeing a flood of investigations and resignations into people linked to the late sex offender. But here at home, the latest batch of documents are being slammed over questionable reactions. For example, take a look at this 2014 email addressed to Epstein. It reads, quote, "Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty." The sender's name is redacted, and it is a reminder of the sensitive matter being dealt with here and why the push for accountability is so dire. But getting full accountability appears to still be a long ways off under the Trump administration. Take a listen to this statement made by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about the people named in the files.
It is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
Joining us now, California Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. She serves on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services committees. Congresswoman, it's good to have you here. So as we mentioned, we're starting to see some fallout overseas, resignations, investigations. But here, domestically, the administration seems to at least be stonewalling any credible attempt at accountability. And it's interesting when you see the names that are redacted, and I want to get to your thoughts on this whole redaction issue, and certainly going forward in the week ahead. Some of the people whose names are redacted had some of the most disgusting and vile comments that were made. It wasn't just about partying. There were clearly innuendos and references to young girls in very disturbing ways. And yet there are names that are not redacted in the Epstein files. What do you plan on doing this week with the redaction and being able to access it? Do you think we're going to learn the names of some of these individuals? How do we get to that?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that there is accountability in other countries, and we're going to keep working until there's full accountability here for anyone who committed a crime. And I am very concerned that the Trump administration's Department of Justice seems to have redacted a number of the co-conspirators while not protecting and not redacting the names of survivors, including even releasing naked pictures of them when they were girls, their addresses, other identifying information, which is blatantly against the law that we passed that said protect the survivors, but you cannot redact the names of the co-conspirators. But even with all the redactions, we know that Donald Trump is mentioned 38,000 times in the Epstein files. Donald Trump is literally mentioned more in the Epstein files than Harry Potter is mentioned in the Harry Potter books. And so, yes, I'm glad that we're making progress and we're going to get more information and more of these names are going to come out. And we don't need more information to know that Republicans should be holding Donald Trump accountable. They should be dragging him in, making him answer questions. And if they don't do it when we're in power, we will.
So I guess sort of going off of the question of redactions and what might be happening there behind the scenes, do you think that it's at all possible, and are lawmakers asking the DOJ about this at all, that there may be secret deals that we do not know about between law enforcement agencies, the DOJ in the past, whoever it might be, and potential co-conspirators or former employees of Epstein that just at this point have not been made public? Is that a possibility that you're looking into?
That's absolutely a possibility, and it's why we requested a justification for the redactions, because maybe there was some information and deal made, but they gave us no justifications for the redactions. And they've now said that they're done releasing files, even though these are really only half the files, and they are in clear violation of the law that was passed through the House, through the Senate, and signed by the president.
Congresswoman, in addition to the president there is some suggestion or some evidence that some of the other members of his administration may have had closer relationship, shall we say, with Jeffrey Epstein than has been publicly revealed to be the case. CBS, for example, is gathering from the latest DOJ document drop, the Epstein files, that Howard Lutnick, who was the Commerce Secretary, and Epstein may have been in business together. I think we have some documents on the screen, or at least the story from CBS. They both signed a contract, for example, for the purchase of an advertising firm back in 2012. Now, Howard Lutnick has said publicly that he cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein because he found him gross and disgusting, I think, as far back as 2004, 2005. These documents suggest that they were signing documents to have stakes in a firm as recently as 2014. Will you be investigating the possible ties between other members of this administration and the late Jeffrey Epstein?
Absolutely. And I think that we're already seeing how much closer ties many people close to Trump had, right? Melania, Lutnick, Elon Musk, and others. And I think it's very concerning. And we need to be holding everyone accountable who was part of this, regardless of what positions they hold, regardless of their political party. Because honestly, this just goes to show what the American people have long felt, right? That if you're wealthy, if you're powerful, you get to play by a different set of rules and you're not held accountable. And it's time for that to end.
I got to ask you about an important part of all of this, which is, and you just talked about the close ties Epstein had with so many people in the administration. As you know, there are a lot of questions as to whether or not Epstein was associated with foreign intelligence services and other governments. There have been reporting to suggest that he was linked to the KGB. There's reporting to suggest that he was linked to the Israeli intelligence services. How do you go about investigating that? Because the Israeli prime minister has come out and said Jeffrey Epstein's unusual close relationship with Ehud Barak doesn't suggest Epstein worked for Israel. It proves the opposite. And I don't think that's going to silence those who have been combing through these emails and finding multiple links between Jeffrey Epstein and Israel through various causes, people associated with Israel, the former prime minister, and agents, as well as Russia and the KGB. Poland is investigating him possibly being a KGB agent. What is the U.S. government going to do, or the U.S. Congress going to do, to find out whether Jeffrey Epstein worked on behalf of or associated with foreign intelligence services?
Yeah. I mean, the House Judiciary and the House Oversight Committees are really the ones leading this investigation, and they are doing a rigorous job of trying to figure out exactly what happened and how he got away with it.
They are currently doing that? You think they're currently asking those questions?
I think that they are trying to find all of the information they can, and in particular, how he was able to get away with this even after he was convicted, and why all of these people were still corresponding with him, why they were, still continuing to visit even after it was public, the disgusting and vile things that he did to young girls. So I think there are still a lot of open questions. But I think what's important to know is, regardless of who he was working with and for, it's clear that Donald Trump was mentioned 38,000 times and that we need to get answers.
I have to ask you before we go, what are you expecting from Ghislaine Maxwell in the coming days? I mean, this deposition, is this a big deal, or do you just expect her to continue to evade the truth, as she has been accused of so much in the past?
Look, I hope that she will be honest and forthright. That has not been historically what we've seen, and especially with the kid gloves that the Trump administration is, handling her with. And we've seen all the special treatments that she's gotten in her transfer and all of that. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get, some sort of real answers, because the fact of the matter is, what she helped, what all of these people did, was disgusting and illegal, and they should be held accountable. And we need transparency and accountability in order to make sure that these survivors get the justice that they so deserve.
Real quick, do you think Ghislaine Maxwell is in a safe place right now, before now and when she actually has to? I mean, are you at all concerned about her security? Are you at all concerned about where she is, what kind of facility she's being kept in, given the important information that she has and that she may share with Congress?
I mean, it seems that she has made some sort of deal with the Department of Justice and the Trump administration, and that's why she got transferred. Obviously, we know there are a lot of questions surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein himself, and so none of that can be discounted. But I think we feel confident that that she will appear and that, we'll be able to ask some questions.
Seems like the question is more, will she be speaking to you as lawmakers who she has to answer questions for, or is there really an audience of one who she has a message for?
Right.
Who she's still hoping to get a pardon from,
exactly.
presumably.
Right.
That's what I'm